Hi, everybody. This is Gail Eckebert. I'm the director of Swan Library Consortium, and we're so glad to see you all here today. We have like 139 people, which is just amazing, and we're happy to see you here. Sorry for the brief delay. We were playing with the technical stuff. I want to introduce our speaker today. Kevin Echols is with us, and he has an extensive background in emergency services management. He's going to be able to tell us a lot of important things. Kevin has an MS in Homeland Security and Emergency Management, a BS in Emergency Management. He's worked for 8 years as the Safety Service Manager of Cleveland Heights, University Heights Libraries. He's 21 years a firefighter paramedic, a company officer and unit commander at Cleveland Fire Department. He's an adjunct professor of emergency management, and he owns his own business, Emertech Emergency Management Consulting. And he is here to talk to us about how we can reopen our libraries in a safe way. So would you take it away, Kevin?
Sure thing. Thank you, Gail. And beyond the introduction, I would like to say
Are you ready,
this.
Kevin?
Yes, can you hear me? I am. Gail, can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We want to get your slide presentation up for you now. I can hear you. I think we're good on the audio.
Okay, so
We've been having audio problems earlier, folks. That's why
yeah.
we're trying to make sure.
Is the presentation up? There it is. Okay, so as I was saying,
Yeah. You got it?
yes.
Okay. Go for it.
As I was saying, as Gail introduced me, this is going to be a little bit different or unique than most webinars because everybody in my field, all emergency managers, are doing this a little bit out of order for the way you normally handle an emergency. We are working from the middle out versus from the beginning to the end. Also understand that the information that I am going to give you and share with you, and we're going to discuss through questions and everything else, is best practice versus just one concrete, this is the way things need to be. So understand, because I've never worked at any of your libraries, you're going to structure the things that I'm saying to fit your library's environment. All right, so here we go. Our topics for today will be prioritizing a soft reopening or an actual reopening, depending on how you're going to move through it. What events are essential? Next, we're going to talk about precautionary actions, focusing on disaster mitigation and business continuity. Third thing is material handling and the use of PPE, which I think everybody is very familiar with, at least the terminology at this point. Retraining your staff's mindset to deal with the pandemic and your customer base, because it's going to be different than what you were doing before, because the history of libraries is you don't say no about very much. You try to accommodate your customers, whereas here we're going to be saying no, or we're going to be restricting things a bit more than usual. Proper disinfecting techniques, and any subjects that you guys want to discuss or have me go into further about the things that we're discussing. Okay? Any questions at this point? And I don't see anything, so I'm going to keep going. All right. Prioritizing soft opening. What events are essential? And I don't know what events are essential for you, so I'm going to tell you to do this. Create a list of all of your functions, everything that you normally do. And this is going to be library by library, system by system. What do you do on a daily basis? What do you do weekly? And what do you do monthly? Once you create that list, you want to look at ways of abbreviating the list, including reducing the hours that you're open. Let's say that you don't have one item on your list that you can do less of that item. So maybe you want to think about for 30 or 60 days being open for less time because there's disinfecting that's going to need to be done in between your normal daily events, if that makes sense to everybody. All right. Now, this is a broad and generic statement, but most libraries hold multiple events daily, along with general customer services and browsing/loitering. Because I think we all have those who come to our buildings who may start off browsing and wound up loitering. And we also have those who, as soon as they come in the door, loitering is what they're doing. So we want to think of ways to limit or eliminate these services. This will limit the potential for exposure for both you, your staff, and the public. Because the one thing that you don't want to be seen as or known as is a secondary incubator for a continued cycle or a new cycle of the coronavirus. I mean, that's just a bad image thing for a library. And because of the way libraries are funded and everything else, image is your biggest issue. So you want to be very careful on you doing things that may hurt your image. And we're going to keep going with this same subject. Think of ways to limit browsing, or if you need, and totally eliminate loitering. If people come in and they need to browse for an item for a minute or two to figure out what they want, yes, that's great. But if they're just coming in looking for seats and just want to sit and hang out because they're tired of being at home, you cannot be party to that. And one of the simplest ways to eliminate loitering is remove all your chairs. Remove all of those comfortable, nice chairs that you have around in your browsing areas and other places that people will migrate to and just sit. You remove those. Now they're going to stay on their feet. They're going to look for items and they're going to realize that I need to take this home to read it any further or to look at it any further. Okay. And guys, if you have questions, I'm on the live comments stream. So if you have questions, pop them up because I know as this goes, there are going to be questions. All right. And we're still going to prioritize the soft opening. Determine specific lengths of time for any event you deem essential. So, yeah, I don't know how many, Gail, can you hear me? You can hear me. How many libraries are we talking about here?
Yes, I sure can.
In the SWOON consortium, how many libraries are we talking about? Did you get that? How many libraries
56, well, our supporting members are at 56. It's triple that if you take our geographic folks. It's every single library in our 17 county area, so hundreds.
Okay, so with determining specific lengths of time for any event, it's going to be determined by each library. So this is one of those where this isn't a blanket kind of statement. You guys are going to have to look at this individually. And part of the reason why you're going to do all of this is you need to allow for disinfecting of areas after an event is over and before something else starts in that area. Because disinfecting is going to be disinfecting is going to become part of your daily routine, so much so that you need to plan time for it. It can't be the, oh, did we clean this off kind of thing, the way things used to get done. Or if you have cleaning services waiting for them to come in, you're going to be doing this disinfecting as your day moves through. Okay. Allot proper amount of time for staff to disinfect. Note, you want to pay special attention to your restrooms if you leave them open, because a lot of places I'm hearing are closing their public restroom facilities, which will also limit the amount of time that the public is in your building. Okay, but you want to disinfect and pay special attention to high touch areas. And some of the things that people forget in terms of high touch areas are doorknobs and light switches. If you don't have automated light switches in the area, Imagine how many times that light switch gets touched in a run of a week. So you want to disinfect those areas because they are the types of surfaces because they get forgotten about that can easily become incubators for virus. This is very important. Inform the public of the changes. This should assist you with customer service issues because with I'm guessing everybody is starting thinking about looking at going live next week or the week after. With that in mind, if you give people some advance notice of the changes that they may need to expect, it may make it easier on your staff in dealing with them and getting them accustomed to the next stage or the new normal that libraries are going to experience. I don't know, Gail, and you can answer this question for me. How many people are in the email chain with Melissa Latanzi? Because I'm referencing an email from Melissa here.
I don't know the.
What I'll do is this: the email that I'm
I don't
referencing.
know.
Let me say this:
Okay.
the email that I'm referencing from her, I'll send to you so everybody can see the information that she was referring to. The website that I have there is another website. It's Business Resiliency and Continuity. They do a great job of breaking continuity down to the nth degree. So that URL there is very good site for people to go and take a look at.
We can. We
Go ahead.
easily can send your PowerPoint out to everybody
Everyone,
who's registered, and I
sure.
have email capacity, so we can get all this information out to everybody.
Sure. And what I'll do is the email from Melissa that I'm specifically referring to, I will send you that email again so you can send that out to everybody. Because what she did is she pulled about 10 things off and just in a bullet point order. She has those listed, and I'll just forward that so everybody can kind of look at it and make it fit their situation. Okay.
That's great.
All righty. We're going to keep
We'll,
moving
we'll
forward
send them
unless
out to
some.
everyone.
Yes. If you have questions, please chime in at any time you like. Precautionary actions and focusing on disaster mitigation and business continuity. Okay, first things first, let me explain to you what disaster mitigation is. Mitigation is any action that will reduce or eliminate the impact and risk of an associated hazard. So even though we're working kind of from the middle of this because the pandemic has been live since the beginning of the year, what we want to do is reduce or eliminate the chance of spreading it further through contacts at the library. If that makes sense to what everybody's listening, let me look here real fast. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I noticed that myself. Yeah. Daily temperature monitoring for your staff. It would be impractical to ask you to monitor every incoming person. But if you can take temperatures, chart and monitor those temperatures for your staff, you can, using the CDC and the National Institute for Health guidelines of 100.4 as being a temperature that's too high to be in the public. Because once you're at that temperature, you are starting to show that you're ill. I don't know if your temperature runs a little low like mine, but 98.6 is the standard for temperatures for human. So like 95% of the population's body temperature is 98.6 if they're not ill. Mine is a little bit below that. Some people might run a point whatever a little above that, but the human average is 98.6. Using that as a guideline, if you do get into temperature monitoring of staff, you know if somebody comes in at 100.4, 100.8, you want to send that person home because even if they don't have the coronavirus, they're sick and they're going to spread whatever they have through the rest of your staff, and you're going to wind up closing anyway because you won't have people to work. All right. Limit staff time on the floor. Okay, this is another mitigating step. So I don't know. I'll use Cleveland Heights Library as an example for this. Reference staff, circulation staff are usually on the floor in 1 hour blocks. You may want to consider, if you do something similar to this, is shortening the length of those blocks. And we'll talk about some ways it's possible to do that in just a minute. If you have certain staff that have even higher patron contact, you may want to cut that rotation in half or even more than in half than the normal floor time. So let's do it this way. Let's say if you got a library, you got 5 reference librarians, you got 5 circulation people, and they're usually on the floor out of 8 hours. They're on the floor 2.5 hours apiece in some form or fashion. You may want to extend that out so it gives them a little more time to be away from the public, and also just to wash their hands, to change PPE, all of those things. Because the other thing is changing PPE in front of people can be a little off-putting. All right. Let me see. I'm looking here. Oh, okay. That's personal. All right. So let's talk about business continuity. What is business continuity? Isn't it? It's advanced planning and preparation to ensure organizational capability to operate critical functions during the times of emergency, which, even if you don't have it, if you don't term it business continuity, everybody does this. Even if you don't have a formal plan, everybody does this. When something goes wrong, you actually set up plans to reopen, to continue doing business. So what you want to do is go back and examine your documentation and see if you are in line with your actual documentation on reopening. Okay. You want to, in your continuity planning and in your thinking about your continuity planning, you want to include some of the following things: communicating with customers, vendors, and any other third parties that you may deal with. Because if you have, like here at Cleveland Heights, we do a food pantry thing every month. So we needed to communicate with them. We need to communicate changes with them. You have vendors, you have service people. You need to communicate your changes that could affect them with them. All right. Providing, you got to really, really sit and think and talk with your management teams on how are we going to provide the service that we deem essential under these new conditions. Because I tell you what, I was supposed to get with Gail today at 10:30. We wound up getting together at noon, and that's why we ran a little late starting, because we were having a meeting today that was to discuss curbside pickup. A meeting that was scheduled to last for an hour and a half went from 5 minutes after 9 until 11:40. So this is why you want to have these pre-sessions, so you can work out every minute detail that's going to be a part of your preparations to reopen. Waiting till the day that you reopen and then trying to fix every obstacle that comes up on the fly, you'll find that all you're going to be doing for your first several days of being open is fixing obstacles. All right, let's see. Think about restoring your business processes in phases. Okay, so you listed all the things that you normally do. You broke that down to the things that are essential. Now, take those 20, 50, whatever the number of items it is, break them into phases. What do I need to do in phase one, which might be a week, 2 weeks? It's all up to you. But break those things you do into phases. And I'll give you an example because I can't speak for your libraries. But how important is story time? Is it a phase one event? Is it a phase four event? How important is any one single item? If you have public meetings that are held at your library, when do you bring those back into your building? And how do you bring those back into your building? These are all part of your continuity planning sessions that managers and other key people in your organization need to sit down and really hammer out when and how you're going to bring those back online. Employee support. Okay, you're about to tell people, even though you realize that there is a possibly life ending viral element in our environment now, we need you to come back to work. So you're going to need to support your staff. You're going to need to have, you may need to have, make contact with your county Department of HHS, Health and Human Services, and you may need to have a debriefer come in or somebody come in and do some critical incident work with these people just to ease their mind about coming back to work while things are still a little up in the air. And the reason I say that is there is no concrete virus right now. And if you've looked at the general rule that the FDA uses to clear a experimental medication to full usage, that can take up to 10 years. Well, we're not talking about a 10-year period here that you're talking about bringing staff in the next week or two. So you may want to bring in some other professional to help you make the staff understand what's going on, what is at risk, what isn't at risk, and all of the things that can that can make this process easier for you to get your library reopened. I didn't put it up here, but with everything that I'm gonna say, you're gonna hear me say disinfect over and over again. But the other thing is to remember, as you're setting things up, you want to keep in mind that the idea of social distancing. All right. I get it that within the library, you don't necessarily want to go and put a bunch of marks on your floors and things like this, but you can use stanchions with the paper. Hey, you're six feet from this point. It's the next person. Use cones. Use whatever you can, but you want to keep that mindset of social distancing in the minds of all of your patrons and your staff. Okay. Anybody have any questions at this point? No, because I still see the last thing that was put up on the live comments. All right, we're going to move on with this subject. Technological support. That's your in-house IT, and that's also any and every way that you support your community, your library community as a whole. So, is your technology ready to deal with your patron base with everything that's going to change? Because remember, there's going to probably be for your first month or so, there are going to be less people coming in your library. They may still need to use your services, and your technology department is going to play a big part in giving those people service. Workaround processes for your technology or the lack of technology, because once again, I don't know each of your libraries, but do you have workaround processes already predetermined for areas that may lack technology or areas that may lack any other service that you provide. So you want to have some workarounds for that, outreach and those things. This one is going to be important, especially for multiple library systems. You may want to relocate and reallocate staff so you can, where practical, or if it's not practical, to have all of your buildings open, because all of your staff may not come back right away. Some of them may have at-risk populations at home, which makes it impossible for them to come back to work right now. So you're going to have to do some interesting things with your staffing, possibly to be able to open one location when in fact you actually have 5 or 6. So these are the considerations that you're going to be making in your continuity planning. Oh, okay. These are 2 very good business continuity sources. It did at your leisure. Pull them up, take a look at them, really go through them and compare them to where you are as an individual organization, and see if there's some hints and ideals in these documents that will make it better for you. Here's the one that's going to become important, because material handling, don't just think of it in terms of stuff that comes in through your dock. Material handling will also include every book, every media piece, everything that you loan as it comes back in. It is now, you should consider it a material. And when you consider them as materials, you want to have the same material handling policy across the board. In this way, if something were to go wrong, you got a starting point to go look at for, oh, we need to do this better, or we need to do this differently. And we'll take a look at this. PPE is personal protective equipment. Everybody who's had it, if you own a TV and have been watching in the last 2 months, you know what PPE is. But a little more information. PPE is used as barrier protection between human skin, bodily openings from viral, bacterial, chemical, biological, or radiological materials. Depending on the type of PPE, workers can operate in various levels of contamination. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I did in my time in the fire service, I was a hazardous material specialist. So you've seen those guys working in the big rubber Gumby suits. That's PPE. I've worked in that. We don't have to go that far at the library level. What we want to look at the library level is, oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Who should wear PPE first, and then we'll get into types of PPE. Anyone handling materials or in public or in constant contact with the public. And at that level, you want to wear gloves and a mask at a minimum. Another form of PPE is hand washing, because it's going to protect you. So as you doff or take off PPE, you want to remember to wash your hands. Very important. This is very important to remember. If you have on gloves and a face piece, when you're doffing or taking off the PPE, you want to leave the face piece in place as you remove the gloves. You want to remove the gloves in a very specific way. You want to, can you see my hands? Okay. You want to take one gloved hand, and reverse roll the glove off the other hand while holding on to that glove with the other gloved hand. Do the same thing again, and then knot that off and throw it away. wash your hands. You still have your respiratory protection in place. And I'm to that point, and I just kind of jumped ahead of my slides. I think I've been talking about this so much now that I'm faster than the slides. There is a great, if you want to, I mean, this thing is great. If you want to download it and just put it up on your walls at work, it walks you through taking off every layer of PPE that you would definitely be using at the library and then some. And it's step by step. It's real clear. It's not quite uh, uh, cartoon animated, but it's very well illustrated. So your types of PPE, of course, your gloves. That's number one. Mask. You can get plexi plastic face shields, and even your standard eye protection. Thing with eye protection and your plexi plastic face shields, if you are a glasses wearer and you choose one or the other, make sure they operate with your corrective lenses. Corrective lenses are not eye protection, for anybody that's wondering. Respiratory protection, once again, if you've been paying any attention in the last couple of months, you've heard N95. That is your hospital quality face mask. Another quality level face mask is FFP2. These are probably the two standards that if you called a company that sells any type of industrial equipment, these are the two types of masks that they're going to have the most access to. Even though, as you see now, people are using bandanas, old clothing that they've cut off and made into masks. This gives you some idea that almost anything is some level of protection. These are your standard levels of approved protection. Gowns and or Tyvek disposable suits. I don't think we really need to go that far. I don't know what all of your levels of contact are. You'd have to evaluate what you do to see if you would need any of that. But a gown or a Tyvek suit are basically disposable, slightly heavier than paper gowns and suits that you can use if you think you have something that has the potential of being more contaminated as it comes into your building. Another thing that you may want to consider, and I know the Ohio Library Council has put out some information on quarantining materials, and I've seen numbers from as low as a few hours to as high as 72 hours. And I've talked with 3 or 4 other library systems in Northeast Ohio. They're all going to be using 24 hours for return materials as a guide point for quarantining these things before staff is working with them and putting them back out on the shelves. The one good piece of information so far, everybody is pretty much of the opinion with books and other paper materials, because of their porous nature, they won't release viral material. So if they have it on there and you let it sit for 24 hours, the virus is going to die. It's going to just die on there. If you want to disinfect the outer covers of things, just make sure that it's color safe and do that, and you can put it back out. Because right now, everybody who has opinion of value is saying that definitely 24 hours is good for that. But let's think about all of our circulated materials. They're not all paper. You got plastic items. You got, if you do DVDs and other things, or playaways, audiobooks, all that stuff, they come in plastic cased covers. And with that, those things can release viral material into the air. So you want to provide quarantine and isolation for them for that 1 hour plus period of time to keep them from infecting the rest of your library if you have the space to do it. If you have a room or an open area that you can do this in, you can easily cordon that off with just some heavy plastic and duct tape, and just let it sit for the appropriate period of time. You enter, you remove that material. If you need to put other materials in, you do the transfer in a safe manner. Hold on a second. Let's see a couple of things. And yes, Christy Hale, what about laminated books? That actually goes into what I was just talking about with things with plastic covers. Anything that does not have a natural paper covering, and especially if that covering is plastic in nature, you want to definitely isolate it for the 24-hour period. And then even after that, you want to disinfect and wipe or spray it to further kill any potential virus. Would you recommend that patrons have? At our library, we are recommending it once we open, because we're not going to open to the public until June 1st. We're going to be doing curbside pickup for a couple of weeks of all of the materials that are on hold, so we can get a lot of stuff just off the floor. But once we go live and let people in, they're going to have to wear a mask. If someone refuses to wear a mask, we'll have them go back home, go outside, go to their car, call us, let us know what it is they're there to do. Excuse me, I need to take that watch off. It was flopping around on my arm. Let us know what services they need, and then we'll serve them in a curbside manner, which doesn't have them in the building, if that answers your question. Okay, and I see there. Can we just wipe them with Lysol wipes? When you say them, can you give me a little more information, Christina Duffy? Okay, while Christina rethinks her question a little bit. Yeah, well, with books, if once again, with no plastic covering, and are you talking, and Christina, and this is why I say more information. Okay, if you're talking about books, are you saying wipe them without a quarantine period? Because if you're talking simply books, the lowest number that I've seen for quarantine is a few hours. When you're talking about anything that has a plastic cover, I would use 24 hours as a minimum, and then wipe it or spray it with the disinfectant before I returned it to a shelf with everything else. Does that? Yes, plastic things. Yes, yes. Does that help you, Christina? I think there's a little delay from me to everybody. Chantel, we have set aside meeting rooms, quarantine items. That's exactly what we're doing. Chantel, that's Chantel Phillips. That's exactly what we're doing. And I tell you, our circulation manager has actually requested from our maintenance manager an additional step with this is we're going to buy a cup for that area. We're going to buy, and they're a few $100s, a couple of ionizing electric filter units. So if something does release into the air, ionizing filters can get very, very low on the scale of things that they can remove from the air. They're much, much more effective than HEPA. HEPA picks up dust, We're talking things at a much more microscopic level at that point. I see, yes, there is, Kevin. I'm not exactly sure what they're referring to, but if it's to Christina's questions, cool. Access to Lysol wipes right now is challenging. Yes, it is. I started making orders for Lysol products the first week of March. Most of them won't arrive until the first week of June. So you and I have some recommendations as we move forward. So hold this. Well, I could jump around and just re-explain it in the slide. Household bleach mixed 1 cup to 1 gallon will give you a disinfecting quality that you can spray on a rag and wipe things off with, and you can still get bleach. So that's one of those workarounds. I thought if we quarantined for 72 hours, we wouldn't need to disinfect. The longer you quarantine, the less other things you'll have to do. Yes. Considering that I'm going to have my staff touching these things and then giving it back to somebody else, I would still wipe it off. This, once again, is going to be the choice of the individual libraries, how you instruct your staff to deal with this. But yes, if you leave something quarantined for 72 hours, you're probably going to be well outside of the high potential of passing the virus on. If giving it a wipe with a disinfectant after that increases that guarantee even more, wouldn't you want to do that? Okay, I'm moving to the next. A lot of folks are having problems finding commercial disinfectants. Any idea? I tell you what, Gail, you hear me? I'm going to send you
I sure
also.
can.
Okay, I'm going to send you, along with all the other emails that I will send you with information. I have a list from our buildings manager, a list of about 8 different vendors of industrial supplies. I'll send those to you and you can share those out with your people, because if
Mhm.
they don't use these groups, then, and I'm not saying these are the only games in town or anything like that, but this will give you more people to possibly contact to get materials from. All right, Chris Wick.
Great.
I'm gonna
Anything you
go to
said, we'll be glad to pass out.
okay. I'm gonna go to Chris's question first, Christy. Chris Wick, according to the CDC, you don't even need commercial grade. Residential grade, yes. And I'm not going to argue with that, because anything is better than nothing. Are ionizing filters available for one's H? Yes, they are. You would need to talk with your HVAC company, because, as a matter of fact, the guys were there today when I was leaving from that meeting, and they were starting to install some of those units at our library. Okay. I believe I'm caught up. Hold on a second, Chris. Yes, I believe I'm caught up. We're going to move forward. And guys, great questions. All right. And let me get back over here. Okay, proper disinfecting techniques. This is, I got a few things I'm going to list out, but this site, once again, gives you one of those charts that just walks you through how to disinfect. And it goes from plastic materials, paper materials, tables, desks, chair. It breaks it through everything. It's a CDC.gov site. So it's, I'm trying to give you the best resources, so when you go and look at it, you don't have to try to look through 6 or 7 resources to figure out if the information is credible. But step one, and this is one, especially if you're going to bring back your or as you bring back your public computers and some of the other high touch areas that patron after patron will be touching, remove all foreign or organic matter materials using soap and water. Okay, what I'm saying there is this. Even though you have rules against eating at the machines, people will grab a bag of chips, so they got potato chip dust on their hand. They touch the computer. You don't want to wipe over that immediately with disinfectant, because what you're doing is you're leaving those contact particles on the keyboard or on the chair or whatever. So you want to wash them off first. And then you want to go over that area with your disinfectant, whether it's a spray or a wipe. Use chemical disinfectant, whether it's industrial or home grade, or bleach and water solutions. 1/3 a cup of bleach per gallon of water. Think about this. If you bought a gallon bottle of bleach, how many times could you make, or how many bottles from that formula could you make? I mean, you go to Home Depot, you buy a gallon of bleach, you got water, buy 20 spray bottles. You've just gotten over or beyond the fact that vendors don't have Lysol. All right. Spray on, and this is important. This is very important. And I'll come back to the questions. I see them rolling. Spray on and do not wipe. You want to allow the spray product to dry naturally. This takes about 1 minute. It doesn't take a long time. All right. You do not want to touch, which means you don't want to. So when one person gets up from a computer, don't let another person sit right down at it, because you don't want anybody touching the whatever for that at least at minimum 1 minute period of time while the disinfectant is actually doing what disinfectants are designed to do. All right, let me look here. Okay, I'm gonna go back up here a little bit. Okay. We have this on COVID page, Neo. Yes. Okay. Hold on, jump too fast. And specifically, Neo's list of PPE. All right. Part discussion about obtaining Lysol wipes according to Neo. Yes, that is correct. Amazon does have the business and government or section that will speed your process, but understand, speeding your process doesn't mean call today, have it tomorrow or Friday, but it will make it faster than possibly waiting on some of the other slower sources. Okay, good enough. I think we're all caught up there, and we're going to keep moving. This is important. I don't know all of the sourcing, and I'm still waiting to hear back from our IT manager on one that he would recommend above anything else. Use electronics approved products on your computers and other electronic devices, because you don't want to use the wrong thing on it and then ruin it and have to repurchase, because electronics are one of the more expensive items that you have in your buildings. Thoroughly wash your hands after you disinfect any object. If you notice, I didn't get, especially if you guys have story times in children's areas, you notice how I didn't get into the disinfecting of toys and things like that, because that is one of those where you're probably going to want to go to like a CDC site and get very specific in your search for disinfecting your specific special need items. For paper materials, and this one is the American Libraries magazine that gets even further into how to deal with paper items because they did a special thing on COVID-19. It was pretty good, but it's a little lengthy. I just would have added another, just going through that would probably add 30 minutes to this presentation. And I figure, exactly, I figure you guys can look at it at your own leisure. All right. We're kind of to the end of this, and we've been asking a lot of questions, but at this point, guys, any question that you have that I can answer, please start shooting them now. But something I put up here, I want you guys to remember COVID-19 is going to be cyclic in nature. We had a spike, we're entering a down period, but with every spike down period, if things are moving in a cycle, there's a potential for additional spikes, not just a potential spike, but many spikes. So the way we're going to quickly recover from these spikes is with information like this and sharing of information like this, because we all have the same end goal in mind. So, guys, any questions, anything that I can help make or help you make some sense out of that may not be clear right now, go right ahead.
There's one thing that folks have been talking to me about, Kevin. It's about the issue of crowd control when we actually open up our libraries and actually have the public come in. And I think a good practice, like you suggested, is get rid of the tables and chairs so there aren't places to hang together. But what do you think? I think that even with that precaution in place, you're going to see groups forming. And I think it's the responsibility of the staff to break that up if it happens. Can you talk about? But then you see these folks in New York where they're fighting on the streets, and we sure don't want to go there.
And you don't want to go. You don't want to go there. So there's a couple of things to kind of keep in mind or think of. And look at it depending on how your buildings are laid out. If you do some traffic control where you have kind of narrow corridors where people come in one way, they can walk up this wall, browse, turn, come down another corridor or whatever, maybe to your circulation area to check out, up another narrow corridor. So by making the corridors narrow, and then between each corridor, place some natural barriers so you still keep your social distancing, you can kind of control that crowding. And the other thing is, it's just flat out rope off areas that aren't needed. If it doesn't have a door, you just close it off. If you have to plastic over shelves, do whatever you need to do to close those areas off, because once the areas are closed off, people will also be less likely to try to congregate in them. And then you got your traffic moving in an orderly fashion through the building that kind of lets people know that I want you to come in and get materials, but we want you to also keep going without being rude about it. Now, there's that small percentage of every community that's going to resist, and you're going to have to be a little more innovative and a little more forceful about moving them on in a orderly manner. And that's one of those where, like you said, Gail, that's going to be determined staff by staff, situation by situation. I hope I answered your question some.
Yeah, that did.
Okay.
Do you like the ideas of like Target with the directional arrows on the floor and keep everybody?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Because actually, we are in the midst of setting those very types of things up in our buildings. Because what we want are people coming in from one way, moving through in some very organized patterns, realizing that no computers will be on, no seats will be at the computers, no chairs in the browsing area. So you're going to be coming through, looking at materials, picking up what you need, moving through to the next logical point, and then hopefully following the migration right back out through the designated exits. We're closing off. We got two buildings that have two floors. We're closing off the second floor in both of those buildings. And, and as a staff, if you need something that would be normally kept in that second floor area, you're going to make a request, either a paper request or talk to a staff person, and they'll go upstairs and get those items. And I'm going to go over. Oh, okay. Your question, Rebecca, is great bias. But we may not be able to limit patrons at the university library. Well, where you can't limit entry, respace everything, close things off, put in barriers so you get the social distancing that you require. Matt, CDC site has point for bleach solutions will be effective. Does that mean you use a mixture? If I'm understanding your question, Matt, what they're saying is if you bring something in and you use the disinfectant or the bleach solution as a disinfectant, that's inside of that 24-hour window. If you have something in the building that's already been there for 24 hours, going back to a question there a few panels up, then you're starting to come into your own discretion of whether or not you disinfect that item any further. While materials are being quarantined, do they need to be in an enclosed container? No, but if you're quarantining them, you do want to create a separate area. Does that make sense to you, Liz? Okay, something. Chris. Okay, that's a personal one. Yes, if you do have any final questions. And also, Gail, feel free to share my email address with anybody that was here at the
Thank you.
meeting. Because here's the thing, there's going to be a question that's going to come up 4 or 5 days from now. Ask me the question, because I've had to research several things for people from the NEO presentation from last week for questions that they did not think of at the time. This is what I do, so I have no problem pulling up information for you.
Thank you, Kevin. That's great. I have a question that
Sure.
just came to mind. A lot of people are, when you look at our computer labs, they're, if, in terms of distance, they're really bad. They're just tables with computers right next to each other. What
Sure.
would your recommendations be if you're going to have to pull apart a computer lab? What should there be additional barriers between the computers? How much space should be between them? What would be a good practice for that?
Well, I'm gonna say this without having seen your physical space. If you can separate the tables, separate the tables.
Mhm.
If you can't separate the tables, or if there's some kind of carrel configuration, remove some of the computer units. This way, you can give yourself the distancing that you require. So let's say if you have a 3-carrel, 2-sided configuration, I would remove every other computer, which now opens up the spacing in that carrel configuration. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I've
Okay.
seen some that are just long tables. There's
Yes.
and clearly there's going to have to be distancing. Would you
Mhm.
recommend building some sort of plexiglass or curtain
Yes, there you
between them?
go. Using plexi is a big help. But if they're let's say they're on an 8-foot long table, and there's one on each end and one, 2 in the middle. sadly, you're going to lose some computer usage, but take the two out of the middle. So now you just have and follow me on this for a second. Let's say if you have back 3 tables back to back to back,
Right.
and they have 4 computers on them normally. So at the first computer, I would have the computer at one end and the computer at the other end, which has those people 6 to 8 feet apart. At the next table, I would have the computers kind of catacornered where the per they're you're getting at least 6 feet of space from the next seated computer space and the person at the first table. And then I would do the same thing again at the third table in that length. You're going to have to get a little creative with this, looking at your floor space, looking at how your buildings are wired, how your God, how your uh,
Can you do it on
cabling.
can you do it on Wi-Fi or do you have to be hardwired? That's the
Yeah,
question.
that's what I'm saying. There's your other question, because even if you do it off of hard wire, you got to look at how you're hardwired and then space based on that. But the thing is with your spacing, when you do spacing, you're going to have to become very, very, very specific with people that they can't violate the spacing that you set up.
Because people
Okay.
are going to tend to move stuff
They're
around.
going to want to move stuff. And you're going to have to, I mean, you're going to have to be very direct, very forceful, very, I understand what you want to do, but we can't have that in our facility at this time in your answer.
Which
And
probably means somebody's going to have to be assigned to watch it.
yeah,
Eh,
sure. And
Yeah,
as you have librarians and other people that are in those areas, their attention is going to have to be greater to little things like that. I tell you, the hardest one that's going to be really hard to manage is social distancing and browsing. You're in a stack, and as I'm just looking for a book and I'm moving across, and somebody's moving across in the opposite direction or in the stack that faces me from the back, you're going to violate that 6 feet without even thinking about it. So you want to make people as aware as possible with that, but you can't eliminate everything. But the things you can eliminate, eliminate. Because I guarantee you, as 2 people walk down an aisle, they're going to get closer to 6 feet. It happens in the grocery store. It happens in Target and other places that have one-way directional, because when the person in front of you stops walking to look at something and to compare it to something else, and you keep walking, you got closer to them than 6 feet. It happens. Is that a new
and then it
question?
can't be. You can't be perfect.
Okay, Chris has a question here. At Heights Libraries, are you planning on limiting the number of that is something that we're still working on. Eric, is this question's from Eric, I believe. It's on Chris's panel. Um, that's something that we're still working on. I don't want to say a hard yes right now, but it's going to be based on the floor space that we're going to make available. It's going to be probably one of the options that's going to get revisited next week. And here's the funny part about that. It's going to get revisited again after we open to the public. Because if we see too much congestion, we as a system are going to have to make the adjustment on that ourselves. Because I don't think any of this can be put into one hard and fast package and expect it to be that way from day one through, because you're going to be making tweaks and adjustments just as things move forward. Did that answer your question? I hope.
Well, folks, this is your last chance, I think. If you got any questions, please pose them. We'd love to hear
Yes.
them.
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank you all for having me out. And once again, you have my email address there. If you have questions, send them to me. If it's something that needs some research, it may take me a day or so to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
This has been great, Kevin. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem at all. You guys have a good day.
Okay.